specifically looking at finance integration. We will touch on a few other things and really around the situation or the context around local government or councils. So Alice said, as we go, just feel free to ask questions and she will jump in with those as we go. So this presentation is not about technology. And one of the key takeaways I want you to take away and mull over on the weekend is that integration is not a technical exercise. Yes, there's technology involved, but it's actually just an enabler and it's the smallest part of this. What this is really about is process. It's about you getting reporting that's useful, that you want to go and use. You must have a reason to go and use this. It mustn't be that, oh, finance is making me do it. It's about understanding and trusting that data and really knowing where to get the data that's the source of the truth, and also know that, well, it's not a technical thing. It's not that hard. And the IQ tool, Sensei IQ, that we'll go through a little bit as we go through this, can actually work with any finance tool. It's not a big deal if you've got Tech One or you've got SAP. They're just finance tools. Finance is international language. All of these things are able to be connected to without a problem. Where you need to focus on is your process. So that's kind of the key takeaway. Okay, so we're going to have a poll first. So Alice is going to set this up and kind of just go through the details. So you've seen a little bit about me. I just want to know where you guys are from. Get a bit of a feel for the room here to know which areas you're from. It also means that when I start, bagging IT or finance or the PMO or someone, I know to be a bit more careful as I do that. So Alice is going to launch the poll, and we will then see where everyone is from. Okay, Alice, can you unmute yourself? I'm not actually seeing anything come through here.
I've got it coming through in the chat function, Ryan.
Right,
so all the results coming through. So we've had 23 people come through, 50% being in governance and PMO.
Okay, which is a good number in that area. Okay, so what you'll find as we go through this, everything we are seeing is valid for everyone. Now, there are a few finance people here as well. There's one IT person, good few project managers. I will make sure that we cover off questions, etc., that works for everybody. And I won't bag anyone too much, I promise. Okay, so what we're going to do today, we are not going to hold you up too long. I know I'm between you and your lunch. So we're going to talk about the benefits, why you should really think about integration as opposed to just for the sake of it. Then we're mainly going to go through the process. Now, this process that we step through is going to expose you to the mind of a Sensei consultant. As scary as that may sound, it's really about me trying to give you the knowledge that we have. So when we talk to you, you know what to actually expect. And you've saved a lot of time and effort on your part by knowing what to think about in future. There are some gotchas, as you like everything. As we go through integration, there are a few items along the way that you want to look out for those traps. So we will think about those things. We'll then talk about how you can actually prepare. If you are starting to think about this internally, how you can sort of get your own house in order. And then as we go through there, we've got a few council examples scattered through this. Okay, so now there's a next poll is, well, what's the point of all this? Why are you thinking about integration? Why are you here? Obviously, I'm going to talk about this directly after this. We're going to talk about the benefits around integration, but there's got to be a purpose. You've got to put that business case forward to say, hey, I think it's worth spending the money. Why do you think you need to do it? Okay, we got one coming through, and the classic, I spent too much time typing into 2 different systems. 4 people are on that. Long has accidentally been spelt with too many O's in it, but it's long because it takes so long to do these things. And look, if this was a horse race by like many lengths, too much time double handling data is absolutely coming through as a winner here. We have got someone with a very big council classic is, I don't know if I'm spending to plan or I'm not spending fast enough on this, or maybe too much. Yeah, okay, so 20 people have come in, and it's really around I'm either double handling that data, or I'm just gathering the data and putting it all together into one place. So I want to kind of leave you with a bit of a wisdom here. And this is, you're spending money. If you are local government, you're actually spending public money. So you're spending your own money. Would you bet your own money on the finance data in your reports being correct? And would you make a decision on it? If not, why would you expect, to spend the organization's data or money and effectively spend the public money based on what are potentially incorrect decisions? So we need to think about that's really the reason we want to integrate and improve the way we manage our finances overall. So this is what we typically see from our clients. Everything as we go through this presentation is based on the best practice. You've got myself, you've got Mark from Sensei on here as well with me. We've been doing this for, I don't know, Mark, it's 2 decades now. It actually is a lot longer than it sounds. And it's the consistent reasons remain. And these are the things we need to solve. So what we have is a whole lot of different project managers out there working in different ways. We want to get them working in the same way that in finance, everyone works the same way. It's that international language. We've got to get everyone working the same way. And if we do it, we can integrate to any financial system. So I've got the most common examples that we have, but we can actually integrate to any other. And as we go through some of the more technical things, not a technical presentation, but I'll show you that it doesn't really matter which tool you use, we've got it covered. So it's about, can we trust that data and make decisions? Do we know there isn't a second set of data out there? It's a single source of truth. Do we remove that double handling, which has come up as 50%, 18 of you complaining about double handling? Do we save time? It's 8 of you have said it just takes too long to create these reports. And do we have that consistency? It comes down to, can we trust it? Can we make decisions with it? And from a council perspective, the number one complaint I get is that all those above, but the impact at the end of the day is we get to the end of the year, the public looks at us through, councillors, etc., and says, well, you didn't deliver on your promises. And the way I measure you to deliver on your promises is, did you spend and get value for what you were supposed to? So we need to make sure we can improve that. And if we do, we start getting this type of thing. So we're actually now able to say, I can see what my budget is, I can forecast against it, I can track my actuals. So in this example on the screen, you can see that a little bit behind, and we're able to see where we are overall. This is a screenshot from the Sensei IQ system. So you're seeing a roll up of all the projects and the individual projects there. We'll go into the system as we go through this. And we can trust it's built up for us. Okay, now, so let's say you like that. You're like, yeah, hey, Ryan, I want one of those. Okay, let's go through a process. Let me expand that screen out. So this is the process we go through. And this is where I give you an insight into the mind of a Sensei consultant. And the first thing you'll find is it's not an IT project. Okay, I'm going to say that about 100 different times. IT is the enabler. It gives us the digital solution piece of this overall picture. The overall picture is we want to improve the way we work. We want to save that time. We don't want to have to get to, it's Friday afternoon and I'm running around collating status reports. It just takes the fun out of life. So we need to be thinking about, in addition to the enabler, that true value comes from also thinking about the people and the process the people need. So we're now going to talk about the process of identifying the process and the needs of the people. This will be put into the enabler, and that will give us the business value overall. Okay, so don't think of it as an IT project. So phoning up IT and say, hey, I want one integration delivered on Monday, please. That's not the way to do it. The way to do it is think about, are those people wasting time? Are they getting data they can trust? What process do we actually use? If we can't do it manually, we can't enable it, and then only do we enable it. So as I said, integration's not an IT project, it's a business project. IT just gives us a connector. So I know we've got one IT person on the call. I'm not dumping on IT at all. It's an absolutely critical part of this, makes it so much easier. but let's not make RT's life harder by giving them fluffy sort of requirements. Let's actually talk about the process and the people, what they need first. So how do we get to that? We go through a 4-step process. So this process we're going through is part of what the Sensei calls our proven process. It's a methodology that we use to work our way through our projects. So for finance, for integration specifically, the very first part of this is agree on the source of truth. Where does this data come from? Now, this is why I like in the poll to ask who's from where and who's from finance. And I know if I was in a room, the finance people would be getting agitated right now, and they would be saying, hey, the source of truth for finance data is the finance system. And largely, I'm going to agree with that. It is the actuals definitely, and we'll talk about that as we go through. So we need to agree on where the source of truth is, because that's where I know I can trust it. I may surface that data in different areas. So, the goal is to have all that data visible in the project system, but that doesn't mean it's the source of truth, okay? Then we map the process. We look at the data moves from A to B, from the actuals, from the finance system to the project system, for example. Defining out that process is actually, I find the fun part of this. It's a process thing. It's a whiteboard exercise, not a technical one. We then look at how deep do we want to go? Like, are you looking at every little cent on every little day, or are you just saying, tell me what I spent in a month on OPEX? And how far do you go into the future? Okay, so is it daily, weekly, monthly, yearly, multi-years? How are you actually, how far are you time phasing this out? We've got to figure that out. Then we think about setting it up and doing more later. We don't boil the ocean. Start simple, get this working with the basics, get it stable first. So let's look at this in a bit more detail. So the first thing is source of truth. This is where the lines generally fall, okay? There are a few exceptions, but generally budget owned by finance, but sometimes by the project as well. So it depends. In our tool, you can actually create a budget within the IQ tool. Actuals, always finance. Now, I've never found an exception to that, but that's what finance is for. They're handling the actuals and they give those to us. Forecasts, it depends. Largely the project side. Project manager has to forecast this first. They may then send it over to finance if they need it on their side. Sometimes finance doesn't actually need that information. They're more worried about the actual side and the budget, which kind of a long-term forecast. So you've got to get that source of truth right. As part of this, you have to get the relationships between the people right. Sometimes within local government, you can have fairly siloed areas, and it's about making people comfortable that they are still the source of truth. So it's like, hey, project manager, you can come up with a forecast. You get to control that. But you know what? Finance controls the actual. I'm going to show it inside the project system. I'm going to save you some time and some effort to get it. But at the end of the day, this is owned by the finance, or whatever the relationship needs to be, we make sure we get that under control. We've also got to think, though, about where do projects start and where is the official list of projects. So if I say, show me a list of all the projects we're doing, finance has a list, definitely. So does the project side. Someone's probably got one in a spreadsheet. What is the source of truth for that list of projects? Then we get into the actual flow itself. So what we typically look at, and this is what the whiteboard is for. So we're typically looking at, okay, where do budgets start? Usually in the project system, they move across to finance, maybe they get approved, they get sent back. Now we start reporting against these. So this starts giving us these very nice graphs like this. We've actually got a budget. Maybe this started in here and then from here moved across into the finance system and back again. Forecasts typically project system and then sometimes sent to the finance system for reporting. Not always though. Once you've got a forecast, you've got a budget that's approved, you can start spending money. This is now giving you something to actually report against. 99, I've never seen it not start in finance and come across to the project system. So drawing blocks and arrows on the screen is what we go through when we get on a whiteboard and we work through this with you. This gives us the real framework for what we're trying to do. then we get, once you do that, you start getting this type of information coming out. So what we're looking at here is a program level status report, roll up of a whole lot of different projects. And what we can do is actually see very clearly how are we tracking against that budget, how are our forecast and our actual going. In this particular case, we're pretty close on over there. There are a few others though. So you want that, and it's like, fine, build this. Okay, so let's say we go ahead and we build this for you. So you've got a very nice system, and you go in and you're all very happy. We're all busy managing away. We're about to start managing our finances. And then we realize, well, okay, that's all very good, but have you thought about who creates the project? I don't want to type it in anymore. You've saved me reporting time. Great, thank you. But I have to go, and every year we have to bulk create 500 projects, and that takes time. So where does a project start its life? And so I haven't got an arrow on that because I don't know in your case, but can it move from finance to project or from project to finance? Can this be done automatically? From an integration perspective, absolutely. The next thing is commitments. Do we need to track commitments? Now, commitments are an interesting one because you're starting to get very close into the details of the finance process now. But are we going to get commitments from the finance system and reflect them in the project system so we see what we've budgeted, what we forecast, what we're actually committed to spend, and then versus what we actually did? Then you may, we've got a budget, but do you have more frequent budgets? Are you baselining as you go through? So every quarter, for example, do you either re-budget or re-baseline to actually do that? And how does that happen? Are you told by finance what it will be? Are you requesting it from the project side across to the finance side? So these are optional integrations that people might need to think about as they're going through. Okay. The reason I bring this up is often we build everything and then someone says, "Oh, excuse me, did you forget this one?" So don't forget them. Okay. I've alluded to some of these. There is a bit more to consider. The main one is bulk loading. Bulk loading is not an integration exercise. Well, it doesn't have to be, but you've got to think how you're going to get those projects in there. And so if we look at our project system, we've got a whole lot of projects here. Where have they actually come from? Now, if I look at these ones that are loading on the screen, there can be hundreds. So these are all projects managed in the system. The actual schedules are coming from different tools. So this is a project for the web. This is a Sensei IQ tool. There's Project Online. There's Jira in there, and DevOps, and all these different things. But I don't want to type 500 in. So do we need a bulk create tool, or do we do bulk create integration? If you don't do integration, you may actually need a tool to do it, depending on what your project approval process is. So think wider than just pure integration when you think about these. Okay, then we come to step 3 of our process. So remember, it was source of truth. It's about how the data moves from the left to the right, finance to project, and project to finance. And the third one is, this is where the detail comes in. This is where those workshops get really interesting. Because someone says, yeah, just move some data from left to right. It's like, okay, do you want the total budget, the total forecast, and the total action for the project? No, we want more detail. Okay, so you want it broken down by WBS? Yes, we do. Okay, finance person. This is where you really want a finance person in the room. Do you have it broken down by WBS? And they're like, oh, yeah, no, we don't actually do that because we do it different to the project. Or the finance people say it's critical you report on it by cost code. And the project people say, yeah, we actually do it in our own way. We don't use the finance cost codes because that's just how it's worked out. We've done it like that for 100 years. Therefore, it becomes important to look at how low will you go? So how far down will you break it? And you need a level of consistency between the two sides. As we go further into the slides, we will look at there's a key point at which we start forcing the discussion around make sure you are getting your ducks lined up. So you have something to integrate. As you're looking at that level of detail, there's a bit of a sanity check for you. So another kind of Sensei bit of wisdom is if you aren't reporting on it, really think about, do you need that level of detail? We strive for 100% user adoption. It's about the people. This doesn't have to be about the process or the tool. Let's make it about the people wanting to use it. So they're only going to want to maintain that if it's being reported on, decisions are made. So don't made using that data. So don't go to all that detail unless you really, really have to. And now this is a weird one. People are using Excel everywhere. Greatest everything tool in the world. Not going to deny that. But if they're not doing it in Excel currently, then don't bother putting it into the system, because why would you? Who's using that? If you are doing it in Excel, there's possibly a reason it needs to go into the system as well. Okay, so look at what they're doing offline in Excel and then get rid of the Excel. So one of the main thing, it wasn't a poll question, maybe it should have been, but who's spending all their time in Excel for finance? We want to get rid of the Excel. Now what we want is you to go in, you have your tool. So this isn't, there's not really doing product demo as such in here, but I'm just going to support the discussion with a few things. You know, I want to go in, I want to actually have a place within the tool where I can put in my budget, my forecast, my actuals, instead of using the Excel, because then I get all these really nice reports coming out that I can use. Okay, so let's say you've gone through all the arguments on how deep you're actually going to go. So then you've got to think about, well, it's a very detailed list of WBS codes I have, but how far in advance do I go? Do I do it just for the project overall? Do I do it for the week, the month, the year? Now, maybe we ended the financial year, but maybe, so some councils do end the financial year, some don't. They need to go multi-year. You've got to think about, 10-year, so 10-year strategic plans, 4-year capital plans. So we can and we need to be able to plan out to that as well. You can get all that data in here. You just need to make an agreement on that, but then agree on the integration, how far are we going for the integration. So the tool will allow us to go out to 10 years and beyond. You can go out to kind of the end of time in this, and that is really, really good thing to do. From an integration perspective, do we look at multi-year, or is finance only dealing with the current year at a time? Either can be done, not a problem. Just got to make sure you get the agreement on that. So if someone is starting to look at future budgets and things, is the integration going to be able to handle that? Okay, now, once you've been through all of that, let's just kind of summarize where we are. We've looked at source of truth, process, and depth, and how far we go in time. What that means so far is from the effort involved here. Remember I said it's process, it's people, and it's enabler. What makes up the effort is you've got to get that data in there, you've got to create the integration and move the data around. You've got to make sure you have reports. I've shown you some examples of reports to get you thinking about reports, in that, again, it's not just, hey, Mr. IT person, please deliver me one integration on Monday. And then where does the data go? What do you do? So you need to consider some reports in this as well. You need to think about a way to maintain your forecast and your actuals. And you need to think about the history of this data over time. So if we look at this, we have looked at over here, we have a way to maintain our forecast, our actuals, our budget, see the variance. So we can go in, in this case, we can potentially create a new cost. We can, put it through for multiple years. We can link it off to different categories, OPEX, CAPEX, etc. So we make sure this will work for us. We make sure the reports will actually work for us. Then we've got a complete picture. I was wanting to show you snapshots. When we go through, there will be the financial status that we need to think about. And these things we need over time. So what we have here is a lockdown. This is the baseline. This project, they've got a 317 budget. They're forecasting 310. This is great. They're going to come in to $7,500 under. That's their starting position. And as they go through, A history is kept of these. Every time the integration runs, every month, we keep that history so we can track, is your forecast getting better? Is it getting worse? Not only what you're spending, but how good are you at actually managing this thing? So we absolutely need to do that as we go. Yeah, then the last piece of our process is slow it down. You don't need to do it all at once, and you don't need to do it all. So step one is let's focus on getting some of this data in the reports. You can do this even without integration very oftenly. Maybe, we just, even if we get people to, I know it's double handling, but even if we just get people to manually type some stuff in, that gives us a chance to just show some data, get the process proven. Then we can move on to high level, project level, just get the totals in place. Then we can start breaking it down into detail, more and more detail as we go, and eventually get down to, think of a schedule. I've got a schedule, I've got the exact costs on a schedule and on the tasks in a schedule. This is space shuttle level stuff. Most people don't go to that level, but this is very mature, so get to that if you needed to only. So we go through a slow process to get there, build the people in the process up as we go. Okay, so an example of this, I don't know if anyone from Sydney Gold Coast is on the call. They have a really awesome integration. They've got, it's a very mature, it's a very large council and a very mature integration. So they're using SAP as their finance tool. They've got their Microsoft project tool from Sensei, and they've got Power Budget as their budget tool. So the way this works is life starts in Power Budget, budgets are created, they're sent across to the project side. But those projects themselves are actually created by SAP, which becomes their source of truth, and then sent across to the project tool at the same time. So they're not needing to go and type in thousands of projects. They do actually have a bulk create tool as well, which is really cool, where they can go in, they use spreadsheets. Part of the process is like, hey, spreadsheets, greatest tool in the world. They get all their data right and approved in spreadsheets. We can use workflow for that as well, and in some cases they do. And then they get bulk created in the tool, so people's time is saved. Projects start happening. From time to time, things change on the project. Who the project manager was, for example. This data flows from the project tool, where the source of truth is, back to SAP. And then as the project happens, they deliver. The actuals flow from SAP across to the project tool. So this is a very big integration. They cover a lot. They're quite mature. You don't have to go as far as this, but it gives you a bit of an example of what can actually be done. So let's say you look at that and you think, hey, not only has the Gold Coast got, look at that scenery, but I want some nice integration. Let's start getting ready. So now we're going to talk about just how we prepare for this. So the Sensei consultant has put their purple shirt on and they're on their way to you. What prep work can you do to make your life a little bit easier? The first thing is figure out what you do now and benchmark it. So how long is it actually taking you to collate all those reports? How much double handling are you doing and how long is that actually taking? Now, the reason we want to do this is for two reasons. One is we often turn up and we get all these people in the room, finance people, PMO people, some project managers, there'll be a program manager, there's someone from IT, and they spend the first 2 hours of a 3-hour workshop trying to figure out how it actually works in reality and who all the exceptions are. So if you've got a bit of, we'll help you with it obviously, but if you've got a bit of an idea as to how that works now, that helps. If you also then will, and this we'll definitely do with you, benchmark out the time it takes. It means post the integration, you've got that evidence of success. So just as a general project thing, we like to come up with this, you actually are getting some benefit and you can measure it and you can prove it, okay? Because this will help you then justify moving to the next level. So the next bit of prep that you can do is figure out the source of truth, get on the whiteboard, figure out the flow and how detailed you actually really need to go. And this is the big one though, okay? Think about your reporting. We will show you, with our tools, we have many out-of-the-box reports in there. You're going to have some you need yourself, but some you don't need. So very often when we start integration, We start these discussions, we find all these reports come out, but a lot of them become redundant once you can actually do the integration. So you've got to identify what the real important ones are, what they aren't. But at the very least, all we ask is just gather it all, make a big pile of reports, and then we can go through them in the workshops, and we can use that to work backwards to figure out what data you need and how to do it. And that leads to the capstone on top, which is we'll then configure that integration for you. As you go through, remember there's no IT prep in here. There is some IT stuff that needs to be done, but we'll work with the IT guys once we do the configuration part. For you, it's not an IT project, it's a business process project. Now, I did say there was one of those things we do quite early where we try to force the discussion or like really bring it to a point around the data and the level of detail. And this is the file format. Start your discussion early. We'll do this with you. So we'll start the discussion early with you once we figured out the process on what the file format needs to be. And this really is an example of the data that moves from one system to another. It may not be a file. There's many different technical approaches you can take. But if you can describe it in Excel, you can then everyone can understand it. It's easy. And this, when we start mocking this up, we create these examples. What we end up with then is figuring out, is this going to work or not? So what we're looking for is, can we identify a project? I have had a client where we've gone out there, we've done a lot of workshops, and then we've come to a conclusion that their project system obviously has projects in them. Their finance system doesn't have the concept of a project, and they have no way of mapping the two together. So there's a whole lot more work to try and figure out then. So we need to figure out, how do we find the project in the other system? As we've broken it down, maybe we've broken it down by OPEX or CAPEX. So the type, how are we going, what is it? Is it OPEX, CAPEX? Is there something else? Are we breaking it down within CAPEX? We have a hardware cost. We have a vendor cost, an equipment cost, etc. So how are we going to actually break that down? Then we think about that breakdown over time. Is it by 1 year or multiple years? Do we default to the current year? Do we do it over as many years as you want? And then do we split it down? We've got some clients who only send one number for the project. Most generally do it over 12 months. And how is that actually going to work? So the reason we're doing this is so that we can...
Sorry, Ryan, we just had a quick question come through in the chat.
Yeah, question.
We just had a question from Craig Singleton come through. Does integration require IQ, or can you use Project Online, i.e. a jumpstart solution?
You can use either. It may, from an integration perspective and getting those benefits, won't make any difference to you. The technology is slightly different, but not much. The process, everything we've been through so far is completely independent of that tool. A few slides down, I will get into a few technical slides, but again, from that perspective, make no difference whatsoever. So yes, you can do either, no problem. Okay, so what we are doing, the reason we're looking at that file in detail is because I need to find the project. I then need to be able to say what type of cost am I actually looking at and how am I breaking it down year by year. So it's really a case of looking at the tool. So it's Craig Singleton. Okay, Craig, I'll just use you as an example. Craig has, I don't know what you've got, but Craig, let's say you have Jumpstart. So Jumpstart is a out-of-the-box best practice solution, sort of like a version back. IQ is a newer version of that. So let's say Craig's got Jumpstart. We would go in and we say, okay, you've got a field in there that is the project ID. We're going to use that in the finance system. What do we call it? Okay, we map those two together. We look at the costs themselves. So, okay, how are we doing it? Are we going in and we are saying that there we go, financials, there we are. You know, I want to look at my cost. I want to create a new cost, and maybe I don't want to create these. I want this to be the vendor cost. I want that automatically to come through. So what level and how are we mapping these two together? How are we doing it? Are we looking OPEX, CAPEX, etc.? So we make sure that mapping works for everything. So that is a little bit of a detailed thing. But it's once you get to that point, you know you are absolutely now getting to the real, nitty-gritty of this. Okay, so we've been through our process, we've got our file, we're like, yeah, we're good to go, man. Let's get these IT guys involved, let's get Sensei involved, let's get someone building away here, configure some integration. Okay, but let's just have a look what potentially could go wrong. So first of all, the file, we've just spoken about the file. You need to get data out of the finance system or out of the project system. Now, out of any Microsoft tool, it's very easy to get data out. Out of the finance system, it depends. We've got some who've done it while we're talking to them. They just set up this automatic file export. We've had some where they've had to work through an external provider, and it can take a while to get that data coming out, okay? So even while you are working out what data you need and the process, it's good to start that discussion. So we do like we call it technical readiness. We like to start thinking about these things early on. We need to make sure that we don't build it and then find out there isn't a project to put data into. So where does the project start its life? We did talk about that earlier on. We then do need to think about how far out do you go. A project, you have typically you're planning 10 years and 4 years, 1 year and 0 year. Well, just because you do that, does finance do it in the same way, or do they do that and you do something slightly different? So just want to get yourselves aligned in terms of that. But again, don't overthink it, because maybe you don't need it for your reporting. We need to identify all that Excel out there. So another thing to trip up for is, yes, we build all the integration, but then they still use Excel. Like, well, no. Let's go and identify that Excel, bring it in, make sure that we can save you some time. Now, there are a few other things along the way. So if we look at our system, in here, here's actuals. I can go and put some actuals in. Do you want me putting actuals in? But you brought them through from the finance system. Now, typically when we do this, we will lock the actuals down. We will also maybe lock the forecast down. How do I get to, it's now the 19th of March. At what point in the month of March do we lock this forecast? So this one is a end of February forecast. I can still edit it. Do you want that, or do you want it to be locked down? Maybe like 5 working days after the month, the project manager's forecast must be in, and we lock at this point. So we look at either automated rules around that or giving you a calendar. So you could say, well, what I want to do is pick when it'll be. There's a beginning of April, there's a public holiday, so we will extend out that time, etc. And then we think about, are there timesheets involved that are impacting the cost here? Now, if you're not doing timesheets in the project system, that shouldn't affect this. But if you are, it is another complexity. It's a process complexity. It's a maturity thing. We just need to think about how we include those in there as well. Okay, now, so let's say you do want to go ahead. You've thought about all these things and you're like, yep, pick up that phone. Let's do this, okay? You're going to get another poll coming through now. What do you think is going to get in your way? This I'm really interested to hear, because it really does tend to depend on who does it. So we're seeing the project process, one finance process, some politics. Yeah, that happens. There's more. Ooh, politics is. Ooh, look at that. Ish. Okay. This is interesting. So we have 30%, 31% looking at politics as the blocker, 26% project processes with the PMO, 23% the finance process, 9% IT, and 9% just technical constraints. This really brings home the fact that integration is not an IT project. It's about the people and about the process, and that's what we need to focus on. This concept of that it's politics, to be honest, that was way more, I put that in because I'm dealing with that with a couple of clients at the moment where everyone knows what they want. Everyone agrees on the benefits and they just can't work together. That is interesting. I hope that, this can be smoothened out, but we have been doing this for decades now. The company is, as of last week, is 12 years old, is Sensei. So happy birthday to us. And Mark's on the call, the founder, so happy birthday kind of to him. But we've been doing this for, as a core group for 20 years. So we can help talk you through these things. So yeah, it's 29% politics, 25% project process, 25% finance process, 11% availability of the IT, and 9% just technical constraints. Very, very interesting. Thank you, Mark Brown, for saying happy birthday. So this is why it's a process we go through. Okay, so now I'm going to talk you through a bit of stories here. Now, this, unfortunately, my stories don't involve all the political juiciness I'm sure that you guys are dealing with. But here's a very typical thing that's happened based on a true story. So client, we've got this thing, they put it in, okay? So let's say they've got Sensei and Power PPM or IQ, and they phone us and they say, look, love your system, but we're unhappy as the system doesn't integrate to the finance system. Like, well, hang on, no, yeah, it does. So we say, let's have a workshop and let's actually look at this together and figure it out. And then they say, but we can't because finance doesn't actually have a concept of a project. They do things entirely differently. Well, okay, fine, let's talk to them. And that leads us to somewhere. Now, and unfortunately, the politics, as a lot of you pointed out, does sometimes get in the way. And this particular client is a very large one. We are still working through this process where we are looking at the finance and the project process and how we're going to align these. And this is really where the value of the Sensei consultant comes in, is helping you through all the stuff. The next one is more juicy, okay, at least I think so. So we go talk to them about this, and they're a very, very large client. And they say, yep, integration needs some, but everyone does it differently. They've got the rules, the way they classify OPEX, CAPEX, and the way they forecast, etc., is different in different areas. Like, okay, that's still not impossible. Remember, integration can deal with that. So we asked the first prize, can we create a consistent way to do it? Make it simple. They're like, no, it's too hard to get through the politics on that. So then, okay, we can do it, but it will lead to a lot of complexity to maintain. They're like, no, you must do it. So, well, you're going to feel this, you're going to be sorry in the future. And in this particular case, they were, and now they are going through the exercise of creating that consistent approach. So yes, integration can do anything. The integration tools are very powerful in terms of transforming data, but if you can have a more consistent way across all departments, everyone, including finance, will really love you. Okay, so 12 months later, we are now simplifying everything for them. So let's get a bit more into the depth here. How do we do it? First of all, we get the data, we move the data, we display the data. It's as simple as that, okay? It's not a complicated thing. It sounds complicated, it's not. There are a couple of options. I've shown you an Excel file, etc. That's an actual file that gets moved. It's a CSV file. We can use CSV. All finance tools can produce CSV. You generally don't need IT to actually do it. It's very simple. If something changes, very easy to handle the changes. We can go database to database directly. Easy, smooth. There are tools that will do this for you. A little bit more to change if something changes, but it can be done. You've just got to get through more IT to do it. We can have one program call the other program. So can be done. I don't find it's used that much, because it's just more of a hassle. You need more of a programmer involved, a developer, to actually set it up. But all these options are completely available to us. Now, how we do it is we've got our system over here, be it SAP, Tech One, whatever it is, doesn't matter. We need to get the data from there all the way up into the project system, be it the Sensei IQ, which is what I've been showing you a little bit, into Project Online, into whatever. Okay, it doesn't really matter. So the way this is, so we move all the way up through the line of business up into Sensei IQ. Now, Sensei IQ, we've got our finances. Underneath this, we may have different tools involved in the delivery of the project execution. So maybe your schedule is the Sensei scheduling tool, or it's Project Online, or it's Jira, or it's DevOps, or it's Planner, or Project the Web, or whatever. Doesn't matter. Got a finance layer sitting along the top, consistency for everyone, okay? And we can click in any of these delivery tools underneath and report across everything. The point is this: we start with our system, we put the file out. You see that little gap there between the two plugs? There's the integration. I'm going to talk about that more in a second. But once it's in what's called the Dataverse. Very fancy name for what used to be called CDS, the Common Data Service, which is a longer, less fancy name. It's a big, consistent database, effectively, where everything is. It comes through the Microsoft Power Platform. So the question that was asked around, Can this be done if it's Jumpstart or whatever? Yes, it can, because we just get it into a database and we move it up into the tool. So if you remember, I spoke about you've got to be able to get the data, you've got to get into the data, move it, get into a database, and then display it in the overall tool and in our reporting. Ultimately, you want to report on the stuff. So that little gap there, there's the integration. Once you've bridged that, put the two plugs together, the rest will just happen for you. That's the magic. So the way this works is we have your system with the data in it. We use out-of-the-box components. This is why it will work with anything, like any tool. We use an out-of-the-box component, being the Azure Data Factory standard Microsoft tool. That closes the gap. It can pick the data up, it can transform, it can apply business rules. It puts it into a set of tables in the Dataverse for us. The Dataverse, let's just call it the database. From there, it's now moved across into the Sensei IQ tool, into these tables in exactly the same place. It just stages from there to there, and now it's available. So it's Dataverse links through into the Power Platform, which is Sensei IQ, and then we now have it. So from that point, we can automatically just report on it, because the reporting goes straight to the Dataverse. Power BI just gets it straight out of that. So all we need to do when we set this up, we don't build complicated things. That little plug bit, the little air gap over there, we just configure the Azure Data Factory. And I have done this. I'm not a technical person. I can actually do this. You tell it effectively, get file. See that column in the file? That points to this column in the table. Move it across for me. Maybe apply some business rules, like, filter out closed projects, for example, if you get things like that, and then it moves over. So this actually becomes, integration is not a technical project, not only because the process is the most important thing, but actually the technical effort is minimal. In the old days, I go back 10 years ago, Project Server, the old on-premises thing, integration cost $50,000, $60,000 to do. These days, it can take days and it's done, just days. So it's actually definitely worth looking at because it's easy. Okay, so no more sales. I won't give you any, let me go to the next one. I won't give you any more sales process on that. What I will do is talk about a slightly different integration, which is Sunshine Coast Council. Hello to anyone from Sunshine Coast if you're on the call. They use Technology One. So being councils and being in Queensland as well, which is where I am, there's Technology One everywhere, okay? They do it very simply. These guys have actually gone through that in a lot of lessons. They put a lot of effort into really making their process easy to use. They're focusing on those end users, and they do it on the project level. So they focus on the actuals, this actuals integration. They pick it up from Tech One, move it across. Now they don't use a file. They actually, in this case, put it directly into a database. It gets picked up by the database. So a slightly different approach. Well, not a different approach, but they're using another option to actually do it. They then have looked carefully at how deep they need to go. So they break it down by, I think, OPEX, CAPEX. They break it down that far. They don't go all the way down into the fine details. They keep it at the manageable level that they are actually happy with. So you can do, the point of this is that you can integrate to the level that actually works for you. It does not have to be complicated. The same technical approach applies. It doesn't matter. It's like if you've got a little car or a big car, a Ferrari or four-wheel drive, and you're just driving to the shop to go and get some bread, you're still moving, same four wheels. And this process can scale depending on what you're trying to actually do. And you can change it in the future. Okay, now I'm missing there it is. Okay, so having said all that, what about if I want what I call per person's integration? When is it integration, but it's not integration? You don't always have to move data and put it into a tool like this. So here we've got actuals coming through. What about if that's not actually where I want the actuals? What I'm looking for in terms of actuals is rather to just see them. So here so we are going, wrong tab. So this is embedded Power BI. We can actually embed this in here, and you'll see it's secure. It's signed me out. So what if what I'm looking for is not, well, I want, the finance. I just want to see this type of high level information. And, maybe I just want to go in, high level, where's finance, high level program view of everything, but I just want the program level financials. That's all I want. I don't want to type data into the system. Well, in that case, remember, you have Power BI, which is an awesome tool. It can connect to different data sources. So we create a data set, we get stuff out of the Dataverse, so the project data, we get stuff out of your finance system, we show it as a combined view in a report. So nice and easy. It looks like integration without physically moving data up and down. It's just showing it in the database. So never forget. So think of it like this. So it's a takeaway that I personally would like you to take away is if you are ever thinking that I need that data, like, you'll save me time, just get it all into one place for me. But integration is going to be hard and harder. Yeah, I know that. Ask for it anyway. Just say, guys, I'm not asking for integration. Forget the integration word. Just say, I need to see data from 2 places on 1 page. What can you do for me? There is very often a way that we can just report on that, just show it to you in a report without physically moving the data up and down. This is a really great place to start if you just need simple, easy integration. Now, as you go through, we are coming to the end. For those of you who are overdue for lunch, you will make some trade-offs as you go. Okay, it's about increasing in maturity as you go, aiming for 100% user adoption. But I don't want to be scared to use the system. Okay, I don't want project managers that are bookkeepers here. So you need to balance off the reporting needs versus the granularity versus the detail we need versus what finance actually wants versus what IT can do. So it's a trade-off as you go and you find something that's right for you. And the great thing is the tools scale up and down as you need them to. Okay, now there was a question sent through earlier about, but why do I need integration? If we're going into a future world where Sensei has been talking about this concept, so does Microsoft, around let people work the way they want, citizen project managers, accidental project managers, using all these different tools. And you did see when I showed this, you essentially have different tools that we can use for the detail of managing a project. So I can maybe do some using the Sensei scheduling tool, which is a lightweight scheduling tool. We could use Planner, we could use Jira, we can use Project Online, MS Project. But what about all the little tools? Do they need the finance integration? Well, actually they do. It depends on your process. This doesn't go away because projects are still projects. We are still managing the projects. We still have a project layer to everything. Just some can be lighter than others, okay? And you can still do citizen project manager, lightweight schedule with as much finance as they need to do if you were choosing to track finances for those projects. I can hear a question. No, just background noise, not a question. Okay.
Yeah, Ryan. Also, some of the tools don't even have the ability to track finances.
Exactly, they don't.
Whether these are small tools or agile tools like DevOps or Jira, the costing behind a project is often neglected by those execution tools, and the governance over that list of tasks or schedules really has to be the financial integration.
Absolutely.
Yeah, very well done. Very good presentation.
Yeah, thanks. So everyone, that voice coming out of the void there is Mark Surster. He is the executive director for Sensei. He's the founder, and he is actually an accountant, and he is kind of the brains behind all our integration. So he's correct in that, yes, the world is changing and that it's about the individual end user. It's about work in different ways, and you can do that. But you don't have to throw out the need to manage finance. And if you are using tools to manage tasks that do not include a finance component, you now have that as well that's available to you. You could have some projects, we have some clients that only do the finances. Status report, finances, maybe they have a little tick list for the 10 tasks they do in the project. That's what works for them. Others are doing a more detailed schedule. You've got choices now. Okay, so as we come to end of time, other questions we had, this is a finance integration specific thing, but there was integration around Planner and Teams. There's absolutely integration around Planner and Teams, and in fact, it's actually integrated by default. So if I go to, it's signed out, we have, there's always something got to go wrong in a demo, but these are all the projects. What is coming up is native inbuilt integration to Teams for all of this. Planner is actually something we're building. If you saw, I kind of glossed over it as we went along. Maybe you want to use Planner to manage your tasks. Not a problem. You can do that. You can use the IQ layer for doing the finance, for example. And there was one around how do we do reporting and finances. I hope I've covered enough of that just as showing you through all of this. Please feel free to contact us for any more in depth. I wanted to make this a knowledge share, not a salesy thing, but happy to go through the stuff with you. And just I will put a bit of a salesy thing in. Forecasts, headcount, FTE, all of that. There's a big resourcing like uplift in functionality about to come out, and this will start covering a lot of this off. I'm just looking at some questions here. Can you have a copy of the recording? I believe that Alice will take care of that for you. As Simon has said, does the financials input/display screen in IQ look the same for all projects, or do smaller projects have less data input and charts? But generally, these things can be different for different types of projects. It's effectively those tabs are configurable. You can turn, some projects will have risks, some will not have risks, some will not have finance, etc. So all this can be different. So you not about that end user, you do not all have to go through the same cookie cutter. Okay, do we have any other questions? If not, here we go. Okay, Cecilia's just said, yeah, they will send a link out on the recording. If there are no other questions, thank you all very much for your time. I know it's Friday and it's lunchtime. I really appreciate you coming along. I hope I could help. And if you have any other information, there is a feedback thing coming through there, but reach out, no problem. You know, my job and Mark's job is to talk about this stuff. So we are more than happy to take a phone call, do a demo, just talk about how you could get this working for you.
Ryan, I just have a very quick request.
Yes.
Can we kindly get snapshots of what the portfolio from the portfolio and program reporting will look like?
So the ones in IQ?
Yep.
Yeah, we can.
Out of the box.
Yeah, we can do that stuff for you. Yeah. If you maybe just send, just because I guarantee I'll forget, if you could just send a quick note through, we can organize, we'll get someone to contact you with that.
I'll do just that. Thank you, Ryan.
Cool. Yeah, thanks, Richard.
Thank you. Cheers. Bye.
Okay, thank you all very much. Have a great Friday and a great weekend.
Thank you, Ryan.
Thank you, Ryan.
Thanks, Ryan. Bye.
Bye.